Welcome to Grand Prix Miami. I'm Glenn Jones. I'm joined here in the booth by Brian Kibler.
Hello.
Welcome. How have your buy rounds been? You know,
they've been good. They've been very humid. I went outside to try and get breakfast and came back dripping. So.
All right. Well, you're playing obviously in the Standard Grand Prix this weekend, and you're playing Jund Aggro, but not quite what we've come to understand Jund Aggro to be. Since I think Cedric and Tommy Ashton did a lot of work with it over the WMCQ weekend. In fact, you wrote an article just this week about the 5 cards people should be playing in Standard.
Yes.
And you've got all 5 of them in your deck.
They are all in my deck, yes.
What a coincidence. Those 5 cards were Farseek, Abrupt Decay, Rolling Tumbler, Thunderbolt, Hellkite, and Bonfire of the Damned. Now, you're sideboarding the Rolling Tumbler, and you split the Abrupt Decays, I believe, but the rest are all obviously featuring starring roles in the main deck. So why did you feel the need to move Farseek into the green-red black deck as opposed to the traditional Gyre Sage Borderland Ranger?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people look at it that way, and I was when I was looking at the core of the deck that Cedric had played before, I was more looking at what cards don't I like here, and frankly I think that a lot of the cards in that deck like Burning Tree Emissary and Gyre Sage just aren't that impressive. Burning Tree Emissary in particular I think is a lot worse than it used to be, because even in other creature matchups you're fighting against stuff like Voice of Resurgence. It's obviously very bad against Boros Reckoners. It's not particularly impressive against opposing Huntmasters. It's just not a great card right now, I think. And similarly, Gyre Sage is a card that when when it comes together, it's good, but frequently is a very weak card to draw off the top of your deck, and doesn't actually do that much to actually forward what I feel like the deck's primary goal is, which is casting Vampires and Dragons. Yeah. So Farseek is a card that does that. Farseek is a card that fixes your mana. It allows you to actually find your black mana, which previously the version that Cedric played it had Borderland Ranger for that, which is kind of unimpressive. Especially again in a world where people have cards like Voice of Resurgence and Boros Reckoner. You really don't want to be just spending a bunch of time and mana doing things in the ground that don't matter. Whereas if you play Farseek, you have that many more ways to play an accelerated flyer, which really do matter.
And without having to rely on the Burning Tree Emissary and that engine for Gyre Sage, you actually have the option to play a lot more cards that previously the deck really couldn't do that well. Some of the ones you've added, Stranglergeist and Varels, alongside Huntmaster of the Fells. So how good has the aggression been with Stranglergeist, and how big is Varels?
The Stranglergeists they're actually a better defensive card. They're an aggressive card. It may sound kind of strange.
The mono green voice, as it were.
Basically, yeah. A lot of people they look at Stranglergeist and they think of it as an aggressive creature. Obviously, it has haste, and it's the sort of card. It's really the sort of card that I love, because it's the sort of card that is a great offensive card that also plays a really great defensive role. It really is, like you said, the mono green Voice of Resurgence. It's able to defend you against the aggressive decks that are playing their own, whether the red decks or the Naya Blitz style decks, as well as put pressure on the blue-white red decks, and sometimes Reanimator, depending on how the draws come up. It's actually a card that gets sideboarded out a lot because it's very bad against decks that have Reckoners and Smiters and things like that in the ground to hold it off.
Just bigger guys.
Right, exactly. So you basically want it against the two polar extremes of the format. It's great against opposing decks who are trying to attack you with things that it blocks, and it's great against opposing decks that are trying to one-for-one you with removal spells and protect themselves until they get to a late game, because it's great at dealing with those.
Not a lot of cards can claim that they're good against mono red and control decks at the same time.
Exactly. It's a card that's good against the extremes but bad against the middle.
Okay. So how about the Varels?
Varels is a card that basically I wanted a card that gave me a lot of bang for my buck. Basically, there's a lot of cards in this deck that are very powerful but are expensive. And Varels is a card that's very powerful but cheap. It's obviously not powerful the turn you play it necessarily, but it can give you a lot of value in a long game that's like against a Jund deck, for instance. A game that comes down to a lot of attrition. I was actually playing a game against Jund online the other day. We were just in sort of a board stall situation, and he dropped Sire of Insanity. So we're both just discarding hands. I'm like, well, I drew Varels. And all of my cards were so much better than all of his cards from then on. It also has great synergy with Huntmaster, because it gives you a way to spend your mana on your turn that allows you to develop your board without actually casting a spell.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered that. And that's one of the ways that Huntmaster was powerful before. Obviously, you still have Kessig Wolf Run, which, that was the classic Huntmaster flip. You just attack, jam all your mana into the Wolf Run. Varels gives you something very similar to that.
Exactly.
A little bit more of a lasting effect.
Yeah, Varels can absolutely just turn games around completely.
So the flyers in this deck are one of the big reasons that the Jund aggro deck took off in the first place. People are just a little bit soft to Thundermaw Hellkite, and that hasn't changed. Obviously, we saw Grand Prix Guadalajara, a lot of Naya decks doing well with Thundermaw Hellkite there. Still a big player, but Bonfire of the Damned has dropped off a little bit in playability, even as we see these, Reanimator decks with elves, these Junk Aristocrat decks playing nothing but 2/2s and 1/1s. Why do you think Bonfire of the Damned dropped off? And obviously, you seem to think it's poised for a comeback.
I think Bonfire is incredible right now, and I think that it dropped off in popularity because the red decks that people were playing were either just aggressive red decks, controlling Jund decks, or like Naya decks with Domri, and they felt like they didn't want it in any of those, which makes some amount of sense. But I mean, that doesn't mean you can't find another shell that it's excellent in. And I think that Bonfire is only okay in like Jund control type decks because you don't really maximize the value you get out of the damage from it. You don't really have that much acceleration to cast it for 2, early on. You only have Farseek and sometimes some number of Arbor Elves. This deck has 4 Farseek, 4 Arbor Elf. You can very easily Bonfire for 2 and kill, a Geist of St. Trask before they can enchant it, or kill an enchanted Invisible Stalker or something like that. And obviously you still get to the mid and late game where you miracle it and it's just game over.
Yeah, and especially when you've perhaps already gotten in some incidental damage with these Aristocrats and Thundermaw Hellkites. They're just making
absolutely.
Very close to
and in particular against the Lingering Souls decks, the various Aristocrat decks, having the combination of Bonfire and Thundermaw in your deck just gives you so many ways to totally wipe out that board.
Yeah, it makes them take a really patient game, which is not really what they want to do. They're sort of combo decks, and slowing down is not what they want to be. All right, well, we've pretty much covered your main deck. Let's move to a couple of the sideboard all-stars.
Sure.
I know you're playing against Control. You already mentioned how Strangler guys can play a role there. You're also bringing in Domri Raid and quite a different 6-power, 6-mana creature than we're used to seeing. Many people might like Sire of Insanity, but you've got Rurik Thar, the Unbowed.
So I think that Sire of Insanity is a card that people have figured it out. They have cards like War Leader's Helix. They have cards like Turn and Burn in their deck. And they're ready to deal with the Sire of Insanity. If you have Rurik Thar, if you actually resolve a Rurik Thar against a lot of decks, they are dead. They are completely dead because maybe they can they can do something. I don't know.
take
but in particular because there are so many other huge threats in the deck that they need to answer as well. Like what do they do? Hold up Azorius Charm and then you cast a dragon and now they're cast 2 things so you end up just being able to put a bunch of pressure on them with your early game, your stuff like Strying Root guys and your Flinthoof Boars, which makes Rurik Thar just extremely powerful when it actually comes down late. Yeah. And there aren't that many removal spells that they have that even kill it.
Yeah, he's almost a little bit like a pseudo haste creature in the way he gets that damage in, obviously.
Right.
But you're right to point out the removal spells that handle him. It's like Charm, Verdict or Terminus, and maybe Far and Away, but all of these cost 6 life. Some of them are even sorceries that just open them up to get them Hellkited immediately after.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Rurik Thar seems very well positioned, and I agree. It blanks those helixes in a nice way. This deck looks sweet. I'm excited to see it under camera already.
I'm excited to play it.
Does very well. Yeah, you've got next round as your first round of play, so I'm just going to wish you good luck. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.